Hello everyone, I'm Ankit and you're watching StudyIQ IAS English. In our today's video, we'll try to understand why is Sudan being dubbed as the next Syria. It is mainly because of the conflict that is going on in Sudan, which has led to death of lakhs of people. Yes, it has led to death of lakhs of people. So what is the genesis, origin, etc. of this conflict? What is the differences that exist in the society of Sudan that has led to deaths of so many people? Everything that is important we are going to cover in our today's video. Now, the notes that I will be using in our today's session, you can get them at a particular Telegram channel called as ATS Live. And while you're at it, please do not forget to subscribe to the channel also. So let us start by understanding the context. Why have we picked up Sudan as the topic of our today's discussion? Now, since April 2023, you need to understand Sudan has plunged into a worse crisis, which is due to violent clashes which has happened between two important armed groups. First is the Sudanese armed forces and second is the militia known as Rapid Support Forces. So both of these important agencies or important military groups, they do not get along quite well with each other. So this primarily was a power struggle. But is it just a power struggle between two important generals and two important military groups? The answer is no. This power struggle actually has led to exacerbation or increase of the ethnic conflict and differences that has existed in Sudan for a long period of time. So everything that is important for our today's discussion, why this conflict actually happened, what is the origin of this conflict, what is the implication of this conflict, not just on Sudan but in the nearby areas, we are all going to cover this in our today's discussion. Now, why have we picked up Sudan? Now, you need to understand Sudan has been the subject of two questions in the UPSC prelims in the past. In recent years, Chad, Guinea, Mali and Sudan were caught in international attention for which one of the following reasons common to all of them. It is because of the successful coups that has happened in the region. Similarly, if you read this question from 2018, very recently, in which of the following countries lakhs of people either suffered from severe famine, acute malnutrition or died due to starvation caused by war and ethnic conflict? And you need to understand the answer to this was also D, Yemen and South Sudan. So that is why we are going to cover Sudan in our today's discussion. Now the biggest question is, where is Sudan located? Sudan is located in the northeastern part of the continent Africa. Right, it shares its border with Chad, Libya, Egypt, Eritrea, Ethiopia, South Sudan and Central Asian republics. Now, Sudan currently as a country, I'm not talking about South Sudan in this video, I'm only talking about Sudan. As this image would suggest you, Sudan comes to be ruled by two important military groups. On the north and on the eastern side, it is the Sudanese armed forces, and in the south and on the western side, it is the paramilitary organization or a paramilitary militia known as Rapid Support Forces. So these are the two important military groups who are controlling most of the Sudan, right? Now let us get into the detail. What led or what was the origin of this conflict which has materialized in the present, right? Now the historical background of this conflict lies in the colonial legacy of Sudan. Like many other countries in the world, Sudan was also ruled by a coalition of Anglo and Egyptians, right? And at that time when colonial rule was there in Sudan, it was administered as a two separate zones. The north and the eastern part of the country, where SAF is in part today, it is majorly an area dominated by Arabs. And the southern part and western part of the country, it is an area dominated by people belonging to African ethnicity. So at the colonial rule, Britishers, they invested heavily in the north and eastern part of the country because that is where most of the fertile lands of Sudan are located. Whereas on the other hand, they neglected the south and western part of the country, that is the areas of Darfur and Kordofan. So this deepened the regional divide which has already existed due to the geographical factors. Similarly, this also created the enduring differences between the people who inhabit these respective regions, that is Arabs versus African. So this is not a matter of religious conflict because both of these people mostly are hailing from Muslim religion, but rather this is an ethnic conflict, that is the conflict between Arabs and Africans who are living in two different areas of the country, and these areas have significant developmental differences. Now you can understand that this was the problem that Sudan faced in its colonial legacy. So things must have gotten somewhat better when it got independent. The answer is no. What happened after Sudan got independent in 1956, that the northern Arab people, they came to dominate the Sudan's economy, Sudan's politics and Sudan's military, whereas the non-Arab communities living in the southern part of the Sudan, mostly belonging to African ethnicities, these come from areas like Darfur, these people were marginalized. So when northern elites secured power and politics of Sudan, they made Arabic language as the state language. They implemented Islamic law based on Sharia. And this centralization alienated people who are living in peripheral areas. Which are the peripheral areas? That is the west and south, where mostly people belonging to African origin or African ethnicity live. So this is the historical background of this conflict. Now, this was the background that I told you led to some kind of a differences, and this was mostly a economic difference, but there is also a way, there is a bigger social difference which also exacerbates this kind of a divide between these two sections of population. First of all, you need to understand people living in the north and east mostly are people from Arab communities, and their way of life is that they largely practice of pastoral nomadism, right? And they claim to be of Arab lineage, and they are culturally more dominant in the society of Sudan. On the other hand, people living in south and in west are mostly African groups. Like it includes communities like Fur, Maselt, Zagwa, who live in different areas like Darfur, right? So these groups not just differ based on their ethnicity, but they also differ very largely based on their way of life. People in the north are mostly pastoralist, nomads in nature. People in the south are mostly agricultural in nature, right? And both of these people also face conflict when it comes to access of resources. You need to understand pastoralists depend on land so that they can feed their cattle, right? Or they can feed their domesticated animals. And on the other hand, agriculturalists would want this field to be converted into farms, and them expecting the pastoralists to let their animals graze over the farmlands is not acceptable. So that is why this difference, which already existed in the society of Sudan, it led even to the conflict of acute resources like land and water, and that is why this conflict or this differences increased between the society of Sudan. Now, in the early years of the 21st century, there came to be known as a Darfur conflict, which led to an ethnic cleansing and genocide. Now, how it started was that a non-Arab group of people belonging mostly to African ethnicity, they revolted against the then ruler of Sudan, that was Omar al-Bashir, and you don't need to guess, he was of Arab descent. So these people, they accused Omar al-Bashir for neglecting the south part of the Sudan economically and racially discriminating against the African origin people. And to check this kind of a revolt, the government led by Omar al-Bashir armed and unleashed the Janjaweed militias, who were basically Arab people. Now, these Janjaweed militias eventually became what is known as RSF, Rapid Support Force today, which still significantly controls the south and western part of Sudan, right? So this is how the origin of this conflict led to a Arab versus African problem. Now, things tried to change in 2019, because in 2019, the government of then ruler, who was an autocratic ruler, fall, and it raised expectation of people living in Sudan that now democracy and civilian rule would happen. But this dream shattered 2 years later in 2021, because a military coup happened. And you know who were the parties that favored this military coup? It is the people who are fighting today. That is, this military coup happened with close cooperation between Sudanese armed forces and the Rapid Support Group. So this ended the democratic experiment that Sudan tried to did, and it entrenched the geographical divide. Because you need to understand, SAF is dominant in the capital city of Khartoum and the central Sudanese area, whereas RSF, it is entrenched in Darfur and western regions. And when there is an absence of state authority, when the power is in hand with armed militia, what do you think would happen? It would lead to lawlessness, it would lead to anarchy, and it would lead to people acting with impunity, committing violence. And this is exactly what happened in the society of Sudan. So to get more power, not to share powers with each other, especially the civil war erupted between the two rival factions, that is the Sudanese armed forces and the Rapid Support Forces, and the generals of these two bodies do not get along with each other. Now, the immediate trigger of the conflict was the breakdown in talks that happened between these two. Original intention between these two organizations was to merge them into one united army. But you need to understand, one of them, RSF in particular, is a organization which originated as militias, and militias are not very comfortable when it comes to following the kind of a rigid hierarchy that army or any armed forces is known for. So naturally they would have problems in integrating with the Sudanese armed forces. And not just this problem, but also personal problem happened, that both of these generals wanted to become the ultimate authority in Sudan, which was absent at that time. And this kind of a power struggle materialized into a kind of violence that we see in the Sudanese society today, right? Now, both of these organizations, they significantly hold some chunk of Sudan's economy. For example, gold and trade routes, which are located in the western and southern part of Sudan, it is controlled by RSF, and they even control the smuggling routes of gold, which happens through the western border countries of Sudan, that is Chad and Libya. Similarly, SAF, it is responsible for controlling most of the fertile lands of Sudan in the central Sudan, and it also holds important seaports that is located in the Red Sea region. So both of these groups have significant control of some of the resources, if not all of the resources of Sudan. And adding to it adds the problem of climate change, because what is the problem of climate change doing? It is resulting into recurrent droughts, desertification and floods, which has aggravated the competition over land and water. And when resources are scarce and there are multiple armed militias fighting over control of these resources, so what do you think would happen? Naturally, violence is going to happen. And this is what has happened in Sudan. For example, recurrent cycles of violence, mostly in the southern part and western part of Sudan, in the areas of Darfur, Blue Nile, Kordofan, it has led to mass killings of people, mostly of non-Arab origin, that is the communities of Muslims and Fur. And these people have been culled in lakhs. And this death of people has resulted into mass displacement, lack of resources, food and water has created conditions for famine, and there is also instances of sexual violence happening against women. Now, the problem with Sudan is there has been a fragmentation of national identity. People of Sudan don't adhere to the country of Sudan. Rather, they have a strong inclination towards their ethnicity, be it Arab or African. And when there is no single government to check the violence that is happening, therefore, the central authority has replaced by many ethnic militias and warlords. And this is how the concurrent cycle of conflict is going to happen in Sudan, and it is going to continue in Sudan. Now, what are the international implications of this conflict and why you should worry? Now, Sudan's ethnic conflict naturally has spilled into neighboring areas of Sudan. That is, countries like Chad, South Sudan and Central African republics all have witnessed regional instability, all have witnessed increased migration of people who are trying to flee the impossible circumstances that have been created in Sudan. Similarly, external powers of the region trying to control the resources, trying to have a greater say in things of Sudan, like UAE, Egypt, Russia, they have tried to exploit this ethnic divide. They have tried to back different sides in order to secure important trade routes, secured important commodities like gold. And when it comes to supporting these people, which is the responsibility of African Union, United Nations, they are facing major obstacles in peacekeeping. They are facing major obstacles in distributing welfare measures, right, and relief measures. Now, what is the external involvement? Who are the major parties, and they are trying to support which of the rival factions? Now, proxy dynamics is natural to any areas of conflict. We saw this happened in Syria. We saw this is happening currently in Ukraine. We saw this happened in Middle East with the involvement of war between Israel and Hamas. And this is exactly happening in Sudan also. Now, for example, UAE, it has alleged supplied arms and financial backing to RSF in order to control its gold. Similarly, Egypt has supported SAF due to its border security and Nile interest. And Russia is trying to have interest in both golds and access to Red Sea ports. So it is providing support to both of the rival factions. Now, what is the geopolitical stake in for these rival countries who are facing or supporting Sudanese war? Is that Sudan's strategic location. It is sandwiched between an area called as Sahel of Africa, Horn of Africa, and access to Red Sea makes Sudan a very crucial geographical location, right? So this is why external involvement we have also seen happening in the region. Now, before we move to the practice question, there is a very important announcement that I need to make. Now, we are covering with a topic which is very common in current affairs. But what about static portions that do not come in the current affairs, right? How would you cover them? One of the easiest solutions to this problem is if you take admissions to a resolution batches, which are foundation batches also called as P2I batches. P2I means everything from prelims to mains to interview from UPSC perspective would be covered. And we have separate batches for students who are looking to give exams in 2027 and 2028. One common thing that you'll have to remember, before you take admissions, if you apply this code ATS Live, you'll get maximum discounts, not on just these courses, but also on optional subjects. And you'll get discounts up to 7,000 rupees. 7,000 rupees is a lot of money. And you get that because you thrive when you apply the code ATS Live. Okay. Now consider the following pairs, areas of conflict mentioned in the news, country where they are located. Darfur is located in Sudan, in western part of Sudan, correct. Tigray is a location, also because of conflict, it is located in Ethiopia, right? Donbas is a region which has been made famous due to Russia-Ukraine war, and Kachin is an area which is located in the country of Myanmar. So out of these pairs, the only pair which has been correctly matched is first. Therefore, only one is the right answer. Okay. So this is how questions come in the news, and therefore it is very important for you to understand different regions of the world, especially when they are in conflict. Okay. And before ending this video, this is where the notes would be available. You can get the notes, and if you have problems in finding the channel ATS Live, you can also scan this QR code. So I'll take your permission. Please have a very good day. We'll see each other again at 9 p.m. today.